Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
How you guys doing today?
Lindo. Hi, Arlindo.
Hey,
We're doing good.
Hi, Arlindo.
how are you
TGI.
guys?
Hi, Orlando. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to have you here, guys.
Good afternoon.
And see everybody together again.
Hi, Arlindo.
Hey, Veronica. How are you, Veronica?
I'm okay. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, great. We had 2 meetings like last week and before last week to present a new developer. And we are going to have another one through Zoom for a new developer as well that offers EB5. You guys that have investors, it's going to be a good one. I'm going to announce you when we're going to do that. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to announce that right now. In 2 weeks, we're going to have one of our agents that will come and he will tell us what he did to achieve the position that he is today. You know, I don't know if you guys know Easy retired, but he was one of our agent, and he's retired, living in Clearwater and enjoying his retirement. And he achieved that by working in real estate, like all of us, right? So he has ideas and things that he did that will help us to understand. And of course, in our business or any business, we have to use the modeling. Modeling is when you see someone successful, you find out what they did and we repeat the process and we are going to become successful. That's the idea. So I invited 2 agents that's a very successful agents. They are our top producers and they're going to come here. So in 2 weeks from now, we're going to have one meeting with Easy. And then the following week, we're going to have another one with Gevorg. And in the meantime, I'm going to tell you when we're going to have a meeting about this new development. Now, the reason why we're having this meeting, you guys heard my message, is because starting on July 1st, we have a new Asis contract. And this changes everything. Even if you are working with a foreigner or now work with a foreigner, it will change. So that's why we're here. Even before the Asis contract, the new Asis contract takes place, we're already here to understand how it works. I know there will be a lot of questions. We're going to have time for all those questions. And John is our real estate attorney. We worked together for many years, like you guys know, and he's been a great assets to us because he's always bringing all those new changes in laws, and he's always being available to come and explain to us what all those laws means in our business. And John is here today to give us that explanation and how will the new Asis contracts gonna work. John, thank you one more time to be with us and to give us the support you've been giving. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure, Orlando. Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your Friday. The reason we're having this meeting today is because this new law actually starts tomorrow. And so as Orlando normally does, he's usually in the forefront of bringing us all this information to you guys. He's the first broker that actually contacted me and said, hey, we need a meeting as soon as possible. So all my agents are aware of this new law, which starts tomorrow. So Orlando, I'll take the screen.
It's already yours.
Okay, so let's just jump right into it. And this is the new contract. Everyone see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as Orlando mentioned, this applies to the Asis contract, but because this is a new Florida law regarding all properties, it also applies to the commercial contracts, the regular contract, and also vacant land contracts. So any purchase contracts that you're going to be preparing, most likely Form Simplicity or Dot Loop or whatever program you're using, will have this updated form. And basically, we're going to go over the as-is contract because that's the most widely used here in our area. The changes you'll see are on the bottom of the page. And it'll say, this is the as-is contract 6X. So they've added that. Usually when they do an X, that means a minor change has been made. The last contract that we talked about was revised in 2021. Now this is revised July 2023, and you'll see the copyright 2023. So that's when you know you're using the most updated contract. And also, instead of 12 pages, it's now 13 pages. So that's the other change. So let's go over what the change actually is. So the contract basically is the same for every page. Nothing has changed until we get to page 12. Everything is the same. And then we get to this page, page 12, where they've removed the signature lines. It used to be here, the signature and the date. They basically added this language. The remainder of this page is intentionally left blank. The contract continues with line 612 on page 13 of 13. So what's new? Here's the change. Everything else in black is the same. They've added this red box to this contract, and I mentioned every other contract. What is the addition? Let's go through it. It basically says, attention seller and buyers. Conveyances to foreign buyers. Remember, we used to deal when there was a foreign seller, we had FIRPTA issues to deal with, and we've never really dealt with foreign buyers before. This law changes that. This is reference to foreign buyers. Part 3 of Chapter 692, Sections 201 and 205 of the Florida statute. So this is a law that was just passed, and it becomes effective tomorrow, as I mentioned. Limits and regulates the sale, purchase, and ownership of certain Florida properties by certain buyers who are associated with a foreign country of concern. Now, what are those foreign countries of concern? They named them here. The People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Republic of Cuba, this Venezuelan regime under Nicolas Maduro, and the Syrian Arab Republic. It is a crime to buy or knowingly sell property in violation of this act. So it's referencing these foreign countries, and it's only these foreign countries. It's not any other country. But if you have a buyer who's from one of these 7 countries, there is limitations on what they can buy and where they can buy. And we're going to go through that in just a minute. Next, it says, at time of purchase, so at the closing, buyer must provide a signed affidavit, that's a legal document signed and notarized, which complies with the requirements of the act. Seller and buyer are advised to seek legal counsel regarding their respective obligations and liabilities under the act. So, wow, a lot there. So we're going to actually dive into that. So what does that affidavit look like? The affidavit is basically a one-pager, and it says that according to the act, the buyer is either not a foreign principal. So if the buyer is not from one of those countries, this does not apply to them. They sign this affidavit, they check this box, and they're good to go. Or if they are a foreign principal, that they followed the rules set forth in the act. And we're going to go through what those rules are. At time of closing, they need to sign it, and it needs to be notarized. So what I would recommend at the very beginning is when you do present an offer to a buyer to sign, or when you're speaking with buyers or you're talking to them, ask them if they're from one of these countries. If they say, no, I'm not, then you're good to go and you continue moving forward. If they are, what you must do is tell them to contact an attorney, a real estate attorney, to explain the new laws to them to find out if they're actually eligible to purchase a piece of property. Don't make any legal recommendations. As you know, I've mentioned this many times before. Don't become an attorney regarding this law. Just be what's called the source of the source. And the source is the law. And you're just saying, this is the new law. Let me know if you fall into one of these foreign countries. If they do, tell them to speak to an attorney so you don't waste your time taking these buyers around, signing a contract, going all the way to closing, and then finding out at closing that they can't buy it. So let's dive into what this law applies to, and it's going to answer maybe a couple more of your questions. So,
excuse me, let me interrupt you for a moment, because you point something very important that we spoke about it before. It's the fact that this new law conflicts with the Fair Housing Act, that we are not allowed to ask nationality. But in this case, it becomes legal. It overrides the Fair Housing Act regarding nationality. Isn't that right? Can you explain a little bit more so we know that we're not breaking the Fair Housing Act by asking those questions?
That's correct. The law is they're using a public safety exception to law, clear and present danger of the public. So that does override the Fair Housing Act. Obviously, the ACLU and a couple other groups have filed lawsuits in federal court in Florida to stop this act. Those cases have not been gone through yet, so there's no judgments on that. So it's still very new. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of issues that arise, but right now the law does take effect tomorrow. It's a valid law. So basically you can just say, here's the law, here's the page of the contract. Are you from one of these countries? If they say yes, then you should say, you need to contact an attorney to advise you if you can purchase this property that we want to put in a contract for. And that's what you're allowed to do. I don't recommend doing anything else. Be careful what you put on the MLS, because you know sometimes there's people out there looking to do nefarious things and try and catch you into something. So just say this is a new law that came out. If you're from one of these 7 countries, you must contact your attorney before we can move forward, and leave it at that. Okay. So what does the law cover, and are there exceptions to the law? There are. So as we talked about, foreign principles of these foreign countries. The countries again are China, Russia, Iran, Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, and Syria. And if you want, I'll add this this document to the chat, and you can go over it at your leisure. Buyers are a foreign principle if any of these apply to them. So what buyers are they talking about? Number one, the government of one of those countries, and I doubt that's going to be an issue for us, or a political party will contact you. That's probably not an issue. But what is an issue for us as realtors down here in South Florida is if a partnership or corporation or LLC with a principal place of business in a foreign country is considered a foreign buyer. A person who is domiciled in a foreign country, which means lives in a foreign country and is not a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the United States, that person is also considered a foreigner under this act. And even if there's, let's say, a Florida LLC or Florida corporation, if a foreign person owns or has a controlling interest in that association, then that's also considered a foreign buyer, and this law applies to them. So we have foreign countries and we have what foreign buyers are. What happens next? So if a buyer is a foreign person or principal, Florida law prohibits them from the following. Here's what they can and cannot buy. A foreign buyer, according to this act, from one of those 7 countries they're prohibited from purchasing or acquiring any interest in real property in Florida classified as agricultural land. So number one, if you have a foreign buyer from one of those countries, they cannot purchase agricultural land at all, 0. Number two, there is a limited exception from purchasing or acquiring any interest in real property in Florida within 10 miles of a critical infrastructure facility or military installation. So, number one, they can't buy agricultural land. Number two, they can't buy any interest in real property, houses, condos, or anything within 10 miles of a critical infrastructure facility or military installation. Okay, great. So what does that mean? What's a critical infrastructure facility or military installation? The statute actually provided those details, and I've listed them down here below. Number one, number two, military installation means any base camp, post, station, yard, or center encompassing at least 10 contiguous acres that is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense or its affiliates. So basically here in South Florida, we have an Air Force base in Homestead. So that's our only military installation around here. What's a critical infrastructure facility? This means any of the following if it employs measures such as fences, barriers, or guard posts that are designed to exclude unauthorized persons. So what are those facilities? A chemical manufacturing facility, a refinery, an electrical power plant, a water treatment facility or wastewater treatment plant, a liquid natural gas terminal, a telecommunications center switching office. I mean, where are those? No idea. A gas processing plant, a seaport. We have ports. We have Fort Lauderdale Port and Miami Port. Spaceport territory, and the closest one around here is in Cape Canaveral. And an airport. Obviously, we have a couple airports here, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and we have some executive airports. The issue is, and unfortunately for us, they don't, the state and the government has not really listed where these facilities are, what are okay facilities and what are not okay areas. Hopefully in the future, they're going to do that. Maybe they'll come up with a map and they'll say which areas are green and which areas are red. They haven't done that yet. So that's why it's important for you not to make these decisions. Don't go on Google Maps and say, okay, here's the Fort Lauderdale Airport, what's 10 miles? Refer to an attorney, let the attorney speak to the buyer about the location. Don't do it, you're gonna put yourself at risk in case you do say, hey, okay, it's 11 miles, you can buy it, and it turns out that it's still within a prohibited area. The buyer's going to come after you saying you gave improper legal advice. So be careful with that. If they are foreigners, as I mentioned, refer them to an attorney before moving forward. Okay, so that's what a critical infrastructure facility is and military installation. Hopefully your brains haven't exploded yet, but we're going to continue moving forward because there's more information regarding this law. Next, for foreign principals from China, they are prohibited from purchasing or acquiring any interest in any real property in Florida, regardless of its classification. So this is going to probably hurt California more. And actually, to give you an update, 5 other states have this law and 30 other states are passing similar laws. But basically, if you have someone from China, they can't buy any property in any area unless, and this also applies to the other foreigners, there are 2 exceptions. So we're going to go over those exceptions real quickly. There is the limited residential exception and the diplomatic purpose exception. So the limited residential exception is if the buyer is a natural person, so a regular person, not a corporation or an LLC, subject to the law. So it means they're a foreigner. under one of those 7 countries, they may still purchase one residential real property. So residential, not commercial, not agricultural, not vacant land, one residential real property up to 2 acres in size if all of the following apply. So A through D must all apply. So what are the requirements? Number 1, the parcel is not on or within 5 miles of any military installation. The regular law is 10. So if they are buying one, they can buy one, but it can't be within 5 miles of any military installation. Number 2, B, buyer has a current verified United States visa that is not limited to authorizing tourist-based travel or official documentation confirming that the person has been granted asylum in the United States, and such visa or documentation authorizes the person to be legally present in Florida. C states that the purpose is in the purchase is in the buyer's name, i.e. the name of the person who holds the visa or asylum documents. It can't be under an LLC or corporation. And D, they're reiterating the fact that the buyer is only entitled to one residential property as described above. So they can't buy 2, they can only buy 1. So if A through D apply, a buyer from one of those 7 countries can still buy a property. But again, this is legal determinations. This needs to be spoken with by the buyer and the buyer's attorney, and they need to come up with the conclusions, not you as a realtor. So don't tell them you can tell them that there's an exception, but they have to speak to their attorney about it. Don't make these determinations, please. Be very careful. The reason why I say that is because, look here below. It's in red. Persons who are or may be defined as foreign principals of foreign countries of concern should consult with an attorney before purchasing or acquiring any interest in real property in Florida after July 1st. Land acquired in violation of this law may be forfeited to the state. So if a buyer is a foreign buyer, according from one of those 7 countries, and buys property, if the government finds out about it, they will take that property from the buyer. It's called escheating to the problem. You're within 6 miles of a military installation, you're fine. Turns out that that's a wrong conclusion. The government takes the state. Buyer's definitely going to come after you. So be very, very careful. And then the second exception is pretty clear. If it's for any diplomatic purposes, then that person can buy. So hopefully you've kind of digested some of that. So basically, what it means is if you have a buyer from one of these countries, they come to you and say, hey, I'm looking to purchase. Your first question is going to be, hey, there's a new law that came out. Are you a US citizen? Do you have a social security number? If they say yes, great. Continue on, business as usual, you're good to go. If they say, yeah, I'm actually from Russia, then you have to say, okay, good, no problem. You need to speak to your attorney because there's a new law in Florida that could limit your ability to purchase certain properties in the States. So have them talk to an attorney, and if the attorney says, okay, they fall under one of the exceptions, you're good to go, then you can put together a contract and move forward. Other than that, that's it. Tried to keep it kind of simple for you guys. A lot to digest there. I'll put this information in the chat, but basically the new contract has this red wording, and we need to be aware of foreign buyers. So I can open it up to questions.
All right, guys. If you have any
John,
questions, please,
I
John.
have a question.
Sure.
My question is, you know that there are a lot of Cubans and Venezuelans here. They have Social Security. Some of them, most of them have Social Security and they are residents. Do that apply to them?
It does not. So they're not considered a foreigner because they have a U.S. Social Security number or U.S. visa. So they are okay. They're good to go. There's a couple
Joe.
other questions in the
Thank
chat
you.
that you can maybe go
Thank
over.
you.
Yeah,
Is there
Joe,
any specific way to ask the question about their nationality? Is it simple? Are you from one of these countries? Yeah, just if you just explain to them that there's a new law that came out and the law states, and you can show them probably page 13 of the contract, and it says that if you're from one of these countries, you have to contact an attorney before we can move forward with purchasing a property. You're covered there because you're just telling them what the law is. You're not making any determination. If they say, why can I not buy? You can say, well, I can't answer that question. You have to speak to your attorney regarding this law. Don't tell them, don't make a ruling or don't make an answer or don't make a judgment. Just say there's a new law that says if you're from one of these 7 countries, you need to speak to an attorney to determine if you can purchase a property in Florida. Don't say yes, don't say no, because you're making a judgment, right? So just refer them to an attorney. Obviously, I'm here for them. If you have a buyer who doesn't have a local attorney, I can go through the exceptions with them and find out if they're eligible. And then we can either put in an email or a letter to you whether they can move forward or not. And that covers you moving forward. And then the next question is, are you a citizen from one of these countries? Right. So, yeah, the law states that if they are domiciled in, and it's down here in D, any person who is domiciled in a foreign country of concern, so if they live in one of those 7 countries and is not a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the U.S., then they are considered a foreigner. They are subject to this law. Next question, John? This new regulation is for commercial and regular properties? Yes, it's for every purchase of real property in Florida. It applies to commercial, it applies to residential, it applies to multifamily, and obviously applies to agricultural. And as we talked about earlier, if they are a foreign buyer, they are not allowed to buy agricultural land. Next question. Hi, John. Oh, hi. Okay, those are the questions from the chat. I'll open it up to the group if anyone else has further questions.
Hi,
John. Hi.
Hi.
How are you guys? I have a quick question, John. Thank you so much for this. This is great.
Sure.
As you know, in Miami, we deal with a lot of the influx of immigration, right? I particularly have had opportunity to deal with a lot of folks from Venezuela and Colombia, this and that. For the Venezuelans particularly, a lot of them come to the United States to come in through, a tourist visa or something of that nature. And then they end up staying here in the United States. Some of them actually, let's say, for example, apply for political asylum. And when they apply for political asylum through immigration, as they wait, because it's a very lengthy process, they are sometimes given a work permit and social and things of that nature. But let's say down the road, their asylum gets denied. How do we kind of navigate that? Is that just basically, hey, just speak to an attorney immediately kind of thing? Or what do you recommend?
So the law says that at time of closing, the buyer has to sign this affidavit. So at time of closing, if they haven't got their papers yet, and if it's in the process, unfortunately, they are still considered a foreign principal at time of closing. And so they'd have to check this box that they're a foreigner. And then we have to go through the law to find out if there are exceptions, if this is their first and only property, And if it's less than 2 acres, and it kind of falls under this limited residential exception. But it's basically at time of closing is when the snapshot is taken. Now, if something happens afterwards, the law actually at this point is unclear as to what happens, unfortunately.
Okay, so that makes, yeah, because usually they are only given like a work permit, like a temporary work permit and a social, so it's not necessarily legal permanent residency or citizenship. Legal permanent residency for asylum seekers is obtained after, you know, they was granted and then they're able to apply. So I guess
Right.
rule of thumb is we have to also navigate where they're at in the asylum process, I'm assuming.
Correct. And you do, but careful, right? You can, careful what you tell them, careful what you advise them. I'm sure their immigration attorney is probably going to be aware of this law. So then your advice would be, instead of saying, you know, it depends where you're asylum, and kind of give them an answer, just say you need to speak to your immigration attorney regarding this new law. I would like for all of you, just it's a pass through. You're going to get it. And you're going to say, it's hot potato. Don't don't hold it very long. If they ask you this question, boom, real estate attorney or immigration attorney. Do not hold on to this issue, because it could burn you later on. So be very careful.
Yeah, even the fact of having to inquire about immigration status is, you know, it's like a hot potato dance, you know. I don't think we've ever as realtors had to do that in the past. Like, I mean, probably, you know, but now it's very blatant, like in the beginning of the intake that you see that first client, you know.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of challenges that are coming down the pike on this one, but they haven't been ruled on yet. So, and it's a very brand new law, so there'll be some leeway here with the rules. They haven't even really set up the enforcement part of it yet. It's going to maybe go through FREC. It's maybe going to go through the Department of Agriculture. There's a whole lot of different departments that they're working on. It might be go through the Department of Commerce. So there's a lot that the government still has to do, but this law is in effect, so we have to comply with it until further notice. And if anything else does come up, I'll post it in the chat, or we'll have another meeting. It would be great if they kind of came up with a map for these areas, but they haven't done so yet. So as soon as they do, I'm sure they will. It looks like this law kind of came up quicker than they probably expected. I don't know, but it's in effect, so we have to comply with it.
Exactly, and it's only for purchases. It doesn't apply to rental, leases, none of that. Just purchasing.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Sure, Diana.
John,
Hi, Tamara.
hi. Does this law apply for EB5 properties?
Yes, it applies to all properties in Florida. This is a Florida law passed by the governor of Florida. So it applies to all properties in Florida. And definitely for agricultural land, foreigners from those 7 countries cannot buy agricultural land. So yes, that applies to all properties in Florida.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in, but it's basically, if you ask a buyer, tell them that there's a new law that came out and they need to speak with their attorney regarding their options, and basically go from there.
John, I have another question. Sorry. What if you have someone who is, let's say, a permanent resident, but they have dual citizenship and they have that citizenship, let's say in Venezuela or in China or something of that nature? How does that work when there's a dual citizenship thing?
Right. So then the question is, where do they live? Where's their permanent address? What do they consider? Where do they consider home? Because a lot of people live in the U.S. but also have a dual citizenship, like you said, in another country. It's where they're domiciled is the legal term. So again, Diane, you're asking great questions, and they're going to be asking you that. That's a question for either their immigration attorney or their real estate attorney to determine. You can just refer them to one of those attorneys. Please don't make that determination, as I said, because the law it's a violation of the law. It's also a violation for realtors. If you're part of it, if you knowingly allow a foreign buyer to buy one of these properties, you can be held liable as well. So be careful.
Yeah, it seems like you have to be very careful. And then the other piece is, let's say you do have this situation, you refer your potential client to an attorney. I guess the green light should be some sort of letter or confirmation that they discuss this, they're clear to buy, or what should be the one thing that we could say that we need to?
Yeah, absolutely. Paper